This is Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Welcome to the weekly Top 3, the top 3 things on our mind here at Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets for the week of July 27th, 2026. The weekly Top 3 is a regular segment on The Michael Dukes Show. The show broadcasts on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live, as well as via streaming audio from the show's website, weekdays from 6 to 8 a.m. I join Michael weekly in the first hour of Tuesday's show from 6:10 to 7 a.m. for a discussion between the two of us about our 3 issues. We post the podcast of our discussion following the show on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, also on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets website, as well as the project's page on national blog site, medium.com. You can find past episodes of the weekly Top 3 also at the same locations. Keep in mind that in addition to these podcasts, during the week, you can also follow and participate in the discussion with us of these and other issues affecting Alaska's fiscal and economic condition by following us on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook page and through our posts on Twitter. This week, our top 3 issues are these. First, we discuss Enstar's petition for rehearing of its Cook Inlet gas storage proposal and where that process goes from here. Second, we discuss an issue that Hilcorp left out of its recent letter to the legislature, but we think is critical to understanding the S-corp issue. And third, we explore where AKLNG goes from here. And now, let's join Michael.
Let's talk about where we go from here. This week's topics start off with Enstar's petition for rehearing on the storage proposal, because again, as of last week, they got denied. The Kenai Loop project by the RCA. Where are we at on this? What's going on?
So what we're seeing, I think, is Enstar and RCA sort of struggling a little bit with each other, engaged in a little bit of a dance to try to achieve, Enstar's trying to achieve its objective of essentially advance approval of this expenditure for the storage. And the RCA is struggling, and they're using sort of an extraordinary procedure to do that. And the RCA is sort of struggling to deal with that. And the stakes are not insignificant. Enstar describes in its petition for rehearing of the Commission's denial of Enstar's initial application, Enstar describes this as its biggest expenditure, biggest capital investment in its history, $250 million, that will have a significant rate impact. So you can understand from that why Enstar wants advance approval. You can understand from that why the RCA is being very careful about advance approval. And what the RCA did in its initial order denying was essentially to say, look, you haven't given us, the RCA came up with reasons why you haven't given us enough to approve this storage proposal, advance approval on this expenditure for the storage. And what you see in Enstar's petition for rehearing, very well written. I've got to commend the lawyers who drafted this and the people that were at Enstar who put it together. But very well written, sort of Enstar going back and saying, no, you didn't understand this piece, or maybe we didn't explain it well enough, and you didn't understand this piece, and you didn't understand that piece, in an effort to try to say, to a continuation of the dance, saying, look, there's enough here to give us advance approval. And Enstar makes a good argument in the petition for rehearing. There's a couple of things though that are still outstanding that I suspect will give the RCA trouble. Again, we're talking about $250 million capital investment that will have a rate impact. And so I suspect there's a couple of things that will give the RCA trouble. One is the DNR approval of the leases, to granting the leases to the company that Enstar's purchasing the space from, the storage space from. And DNR still hasn't approved those leases. There's still a struggle between Hilcorp on the one side and Enstar's seller on the other side, about who owns the storage space. and DNR hasn't resolved that yet. Enstar's response is, look, in the past, you've approved other things that have been contingent on waiting on DNR approvals, and you haven't held up your process waiting on DNR to finish their process. But the Enstar's analogies are to much more minor things than a $250 million capital expenditure. And there's the potential that DNR could attach conditions, because DNR is caught in this struggle also, and it'll be looking for a way to deal with the dance. There's a potential that DNR could attach conditions that would have to its approval of the lease that would have material impact on Enstar's storage project, and could have a material impact on how the RCA feels about Enstar's storage project. So that's still sort of sitting out there unresolved. And the second thing that's sitting out there unresolved, you got to dig on this one a little bit, but the RCA said, you haven't proven to us that you need the storage space. And Enstar comes back in with a very good argument about why they need the storage space, either if in the interim, while they're waiting on either the big line or the LNG import line to be built, after the LNG import facility is built, and they're using LNG imports. Very good reason why you need storage space in that also. A decent reason, not the world's best, but a decent reason why they need the storage space if the big line is built and we go to phase two. Enstar's argument is our demand goes up and down, and that will have rate consequences on the pipeline, or have issues on the pipeline. And so we want to be able to take it at a steady rate over the course of a year. And the only way we can do that is if we have storage to put the gas in, if it's coming to us in the summer when we don't have demand. So a decent argument on why they need the storage, even if the big line is built. The one circumstance that I'm not fully satisfied that they would need the storage is if the big line is built, phase one of the big line is built. So you got the pipeline, but phase two is never built. They never find international purchasers. Then you've got a huge line sitting there, feeding just South Central demand, or South Central plus a little bit of demand. And you can line pack. I mean, drawing up and down on the line will be a form of storage. And if there's no other users on the line, or there's very few other users on the line, like there might be if we get stuck in phase one, then you may not need a storage facility, a separate storage facility. So if you build the storage facility, you spent this $250 million, you're having a rate impact, and then phase one is built, and then we never get to phase two, then you've built some redundancy. And the question is whether ratepayers should be paying for that redundancy. So I think those questions are still hanging out there. And what Enstar and the RCA are still struggling to do now is in this dance, trying to figure out something that will give Enstar what they want for financing purposes. That is the ability to go to their capital sources and say, look, we've got this between the ditches. We're going to be fine if everything else goes according to plan. What they're looking for is struggling between that and the RCA sort of holding back its cards to make sure that there's not an unnecessary rate impact on consumers. I've thought about this, and this seems a situation which would be good for the RCA to issue an order approving subject to conditions, and the conditions including the resolution of the DNR in a satisfactory way that the RCA would then review after the DNR orders out. I'm not quite sure how to deal with the phase one issue, but I'm sure there's a way that minds can come up with that. And I think an order approving subject to conditions is one way to do it. Another is to sort of piggyback on the FERC's process of issuing preliminary determinations, which is essentially an order subject to conditions, but they call it something else. A preliminary determination that the project is in the public interest, or the project is prudent, subject to subsequent things. In the FERC's case, it's usually environmental, but subject to a preliminary determination subject to these additional things. The dance, I will say that Enstar's rehearing application did a wonderful job advancing the dance, Now the question is, will the RCA respond to that and try to find a way to put this all together, or will the RCA one more time throw up their hands and say, look, you still haven't proven the case?
The big challenge here, of course, is, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, but is there's a timing issue because, I mean, we're running low on gas, right? I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, I was a little surprised when the RCA was like, well, you didn't really give us a good reason. And I'm just thinking, wait, we've been talking about this for 3 months or for more than that, 10 months, that we're running out of gas and that we need to pay, and their argument of storage and everything else. So the rehearing definitely, or the reapplication definitely covered that rather well. And quickly here, got about a minute and a half. Explain to me again you were saying, Hilcorp and AIX and everything else, they're fighting out over who owns it. I mean, how do we not know who the ownership is or who the leaser is or whatever? How did that happen? We got two companies fighting over the same patch of ground, and you're like, wait a second, what do you mean who owns the rights to this?
I tell you, the lease situation in the Cook Inlet is one strange animal sometimes, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time trying to drop into that. But you can have disputes, and this is pore space. This isn't who owns the rights to produce the gas. AIX has been doing that, and AIX has been taking the proceeds from the gas. This is who owns the pore space, which is what's left after the gas has been produced. This is sort of the empty space between the rocks.
The empty container where the gas came from, right?
Right. And so pore space can sometimes be subject to different ownership. Get this, sometimes subject to different ownership than the rights to produce the gas. And I'm going to guess that if I got into the middle of the DNR proceeding, that would be what's going on. But it doesn't surprise me that you have this sort of dispute in the Cook Inlet. There's so many overlays, so many farm outs, so many, reversionary interests, so much that's gone on over the years in the Cook Inlet that you have sometimes a pretty difficult situation. And this one being about pore space sort of falls into that crack.
But it's not, as you pointed out, it's not unusual to give assessments based on preliminary findings with conditions down the road. Like you can, if this, then that kind of thing. That's not unusual. So it was kind of unusual for the RCA to say, we need absolute certainty, or
so this is an extraordinary procedure. All right. I mean, nobody's ever asked for advance approval of $250 million before. And so the RCA, I can see the internal RCA discussion. Well, how do we deal with this? Well, let's just send it back. And tell them we don't have enough because they don't have enough. And so let's just send it back and you go write up a bunch of things that you think we need. And I can see the RCA doing that. I think Enstar's application is the rehearing petition is, let's get serious about this. Let's close in on the dance and let's find the right steps to accomplish what we want, which is some sort of determination we can take to the financial backers, and what you want, which is to leave you some flexibility because we don't know everything yet. And I hope that's where they get to. I mean, I could see the RCA rejecting it again. I don't think it's useful for the RCA to do that. I think we need to bring this dance to some sort of positioning so that when the DNR issue is resolved and whatever we figure out on phase 1, phase 2, when that's resolved, they can go forward with this storage because they do need it. But we're not all the way there yet, and we just need to figure out where in the dance we sort of put things while those pieces fall into place.
The long and the short of it is the ratepayers are going to be on the hook for $250 million by the time it's all said and done. So your prices, they is going up no matter what at this point.
Yeah.
Craig says, if you don't got a wood stove, get one, because there's a lot of cold winters ahead of us. I mean, yeah, if you don't have an alternate heat source at this point, you may want to look into that. Because man, but it's not just the heat, it's the electricity too. I mean, how much of our electricity is being drawn by this stuff, and what are we going to end up paying? That's what gets me is the electricity costs, because that's what I see. That's what I'm paying every month around here. Like, how much higher can it get? It's going to be a tough situation.
Well, unfortunately, it can get higher. I mean,
it's already gotten higher in just the last Since I took over last year, it's already gotten higher by about 17%. So
yeah, I mean, so the days of cheap gas are over. The days of cheap gas in the Cook Inlet are over. And whichever direction we go. I mean, some people say, oh, if the big line comes, under one circumstance, if the big line comes, and we have phase two, we have export customers, a sufficient number of export customers paying full price. There's a big question about that. A sufficient number of export customers paying full price to absorb a big chunk of the cost of the facilities. Under that circumstance, we go back to fairly cheap gas, if less expensive gas than we're otherwise facing. But at least for a few years, we're going to be in a whether it's somebody finds a new Cook Inlet field and they demand a higher price or to go out and do that, or whether we have LNG exports, we're going to be paying higher prices at least for a few years.
yeah, no, I definitely see that and feel that. And in a high energy industry, it's like radio. It's definitely a an eye opener when you're like, ooh, do I want to do that or not? So it's great. Let's see. Oh, Brian says, don't worry. Brian says, hang on a little bit. Global warming will resolve the problem. Sure. That's what's gonna. So glad that's gonna happen. Rick says some people are starting to wake up. The line is not going to magically appear. Legislators better get a move on because the gas is at least 3 to 4 years away. Worried now. Just wait. How bad will it be in 3 years? I mean, that's if we even get beyond this. I mean, I think most legislators, Brad, are resigned to the fact that we're done, and it'll be another governor and another legislature and maybe another developer before we ever see what's happening here.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in the third segment a lot. Probably too much from my standpoint, but we're going to talk about that in the third segment. But yeah, I mean, they're all these two issues are intertwined. I mean, what Enstar does is intertwined with what happens on that front, and what happens on that front is intertwined with what's going on globally and global competition and all sorts of other things. There's nothing. This is the tough. I mean, and so the RCA sort of sitting in the middle of this, right? There's nothing that there's a stake, and you can say this is an absolute certainty. There's going to be an absolute certainty that XYZ happens in terms of how this all plays out. So and so the RCA is saying, look, some of us may have political careers down the road. We don't want to make a wrong decision here. So it's in uncertainty, things are difficult. But I do think that if you view this as a dance, and I've been involved in a number of these over the years, if you view this as a dance, Enstar, the RCA Enstar made its opening bid. The RCA responded with, sort of no Trump or something, as a bid, not a political statement, as a bridge bid, and Enstar saying, well, how about 3 of diamonds or something? They're trying to find their way in an uncertain environment towards something that will be meaningful for both of them.
Terry said, Rick said, welcome to the party, pal. Terry said, the AA party. It's the Advil and alcohol party this morning. It's Tuesday's the AA day. It's hard to be in AA today, that's for sure. The weekly top 3 continues. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And number 2 of the weekly top 3 is what Hilcorp left out of their letter to the legislature. But Brad thinks it's critical to the issue. Brad, what are you talking about here?
All right, so everybody's familiar, I hope, with the background of how the legislature left things and the blame that some put on Hilcorp for causing the disruption at the end of the legislative session about LNG, and then Hilcorp wrote a letter back, essentially saying this is why we have concerns about what you're trying to do to us with the S-corp. Fairly long letter, and if you read it on the surface without understanding how the world works, you sort of go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And why is the legislature doing that? Here's my 2 cents on how the world works, and why I don't have a lot of compassion for Hilcorp in this situation. Hilcorp's the operator of the two biggest fields on the slope, Prudhoe, and, well, potentially the two biggest fields on the slope. Certainly the two biggest gas fields on the slope. Let me try it that way. Prudhoe and Point Thompson. They're the operator of both, but they aren't the majority owner in either. They are a minority owner in both of them. Prudhoe, let's see, Exxon owns 36%, Conoco 36.4, and when you're a producer, these decimals matter, so I better mention them. Exxon owns 36.4%. Exxon's the plurality owner. It has the highest ownership stake in Prudhoe. Conoco owns 36.8, not that far behind. Hilcorp only owns 26.36%. So Hilcorp is the operator, but it's only the third largest working interest owner in the field. And then Chevron has 1.16, and I think there's a couple of other owners as well. On the Point Thompson side, it's even more, well, it's not more lopsided, but it's pretty lopsided. On the Point Thompson side, Exxon owns 62%, by far the majority owner. Hilcorp operates Point Thompson, but only owns 37%, and Chevron owns 1%, and there may be others that own fractions of a percentage as well. So when you come to investment decisions in those fields, and any field that has joint ownership, when you come to investment in those decisions in those fields, it takes all of the working interest owners agreeing to the investment before the investment goes forward. No one, unless they're willing to undertake a lot of penalties, which very rarely does anybody do that, no one owner can go it alone on investments. The operator can't go it alone. The operator executes on the investments, but the operator can't go it alone on investments. And any working interest owner can't go it alone on investments. So everybody has to invest equal according to their percentage share in any development that goes on in a field. So when Hilcorp says, look, we're not going to invest if you don't continue to subsidize us by excluding us from the corporate income tax, that's essential to our investment strategy. Here's the problem I have with that. Exxon and Conoco are both subject to the corporate income tax. They both pay that and factor that in when they make investment decisions, and they nonetheless go forward with making investments in those fields in particular. When the field does a development project, Exxon and Conoco are paying a corporate income tax that arises out of their share of the production from the additional investments they make. So they factor it in. So when Hilcorp says, "Oh, we can't do that," I don't get that, because Conoco can do it and is doing it. Exxon can do it and is doing it in both Prudhoe and Point Thompson. And now Hilcorp says, "Well, we can't do that. We can't stand that additional cost, or that additional cost would mean that we have to charge more." Exxon and Conoco have also entered into precedent agreements with Glenfarne, and to my knowledge, Glenfarne is not complaining about those. It's satisfied with the precedent agreements it's entered into with those two producers, and satisfied with whatever pricing provisions are included in there. And those producers would have factored in the corporate income tax in connection with the investments that are in connection with those contracts that they will have, the precedent agreements they've agreed with Glenfarne. And so that's, from their standpoint, that's resolved. I don't get why Hilcorp I understand why people say things. They want to, create sympathy and make money for themselves. But I don't get why Hilcorp should be treated differently than Exxon and Conoco, who have entered into precedent agreements for a price that Glenfarne finds satisfactory, that incorporates whatever they pay as part of their corporate income tax. And all of a sudden Hilcorp gets to be treated separately, that somehow when they sell their interest, their share of the working interest or their share of the production from the field, that they need some sort of special treatment in connection with their pricing. This is just a fluke of history that we're dealing with. I mean, BP also was subject to the corporate income tax. Everybody was subject to the corporate income tax.
Right.
They all made their decisions based on that. Hilcorp comes in as an S-corp and sort of sneaks through the loophole sneaks through the tax without having to pay it. And now is claiming that it's affecting their investment decisions when it's not, when Conoco and Exxon are paying the same thing, when Conoco and Exxon are paying the tax and it's not affecting their investment decision. So it's just, I mean, that's a fact. That's a big factor to me. So when I read the Hilcorp letter, I read it and I go, yeah, okay, I get it. So, but Conoco and Exxon are doing this, guys, and Conoco and Exxon are making the same investment decisions in those fields you are. And Conoco and Exxon are entering into the same contracts, same type of contracts with Glenfarne that you are. I don't get why you think you deserve some sort of special treatment out of all this.
And this, again, just to make the I guess to play along with what you're saying here, this is not unlike what Hilcorp is doing in other places, right? Texas and Louisiana. I mean, they're paying those taxes in a different way. Now, again, I'm not one for advocating for taxes, but there is a fairness and equity issue. I guess they came up here and under a certain thing. They've gotten this free pass for a number of years. If the legislature decides to change it and make it equitable with the C-corps, I've got no problem with it as long as the process is followed. But the argument that somehow everybody else is doing it, but we can't do it, you're saying is ringing false.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around this industry a long time, and I know how decisions are made among working interest owners. I know how investment decisions are made. I know the process that they go through. I know the economics, and everybody's got their own economics. Exxon has their own economics. I mean, a lot of this is Exxon says, okay, I've got a proposal at Prudhoe Bay, and I've got a proposal in Qatar, or wherever I've got a big, LNG project, or I've got a big oil project. And how does one compare to the other? And do I make an investment decision here as opposed to there? Conoco does the same thing. Conoco says, I got that investment here. I got an investment, Venezuela now, or someplace else. And how do I make that? I understand that process. But when you get down to it, I mean, the process is what are the costs going to be of the Alaska project, and corporate income tax is going to be a factor in both the Conoco and Exxon decisions. And if they go forward with the project, they're going to have said, yeah, we're going to bear the resulting impact of the corporate income tax on that. I don't get why Hilcorp should get a pass on that. Again, I didn't start this segment with 1.9 billion, but I'll throw it up now. Again, the state's facing a $1.9 billion deficit, and closing that deficit through revenue is something we've got to find ways to do. We need to close a part of it through spending cuts. I understand that, but spending cuts won't close all that deficit. So closing this deficit through reasonable revenue measures is something that we've got to do. And this one, I mean, I understand Hilcorp doesn't want to pay it, and I understand Hilcorp can create all sorts of reasons why they think they shouldn't pay it. But this one is one that strikes me as reasonable. And the defense that I'm not going to make an investment if I don't get this just doesn't ring true, because Conoco and Conoco and Exxon are making those investments, and they're paying the corporate income tax.
I'd be curious to see what Conoco and Exxon's commentary is on this. From their perspective, since again, especially on Point Thompson, where Exxon owns 60% of the field, I mean, they'd be like, hey, we'd love to sell this. We'd be okay with that. I mean, it seems like they're letting Hilcorp do all the talking at this point.
Well, it's no great secret that all of the producers and all of the industry has sort of entered into a death pact with each other. None of us will speak ill about another one of us for fear that that everybody will then turn on us. And so Exxon and Conoco, you're never going to get them to talk about this. They talk through AOGA, and AOGA is all in this death pact also. And they'll say, yes, this is bad. because one of our members thinks it's bad. And so the death pact is, if any member thinks it's bad, then all of the members thinks it's bad.
Just out of curiosity, do you think that the S-corp tax, the pass-through tax, will be priority number one in the upcoming session? Do you think that will be the next high water mark that people are trying to reach for here in the upcoming session, since it failed again here in this one?
Depends on the governor. I mean, if Bernadette's governor, we're going to go through a big cycle like we did at the beginning of the Dunleavy administration about, I'm going to cut my way out of this budget, and that'll fail. But it'll take us a year or two before we all realize that fails. If somebody else is elected governor, there are candidates where the S-corp would be part of a revenue package to try to address a portion of the deficit, and so that would raise its profile. To me, it should be not the number one issue. A revenue package, a reasonable revenue package, reasonable fiscal package should be the number one issue. But this would be a part of that. It's just too logical to say the other producers are paying it. Why can't you pay it? And it's just too logical to when you think about this from the big picture, too logical a loophole to close, not to close it.
Craig, I can understand you having a be in discontent or disagreement with Brad, but you shouldn't put stuff out there that we just know is not true. Brad is not a huge Walker supporter. I mean, just throw stuff out there. I
think Craig dropped out of the moon or something. If he believes that, he hasn't watched the last 5 years or 10 years of our discussions.
No, he's just very upset with the direction that you've taken everything here. I had to laugh at the beginning of the segment because he said, I was just looking for the comment. He said, what's the over and under that Brad is going to mention Texas billionaires in the segment here? And Brad, that's not Brad's thing. It's never been Brad's thing. I don't know how Craig is. It's like he's a broken record. He's just stuck in the groove. Can't get rid of it. But
what I don't know, and what would be interesting, and it's either yes or no, is whether Craig's a Hilcorp employee or a Hilcorp supplier employee.
Yeah.
And whether that's what it factor that's having on his comments. But yeah, he says that crap all the time, and it's pretty humorous.
Yeah. Well, it's anyway, it's I don't mind you having a difference of opinion with Brad. I mean, that's fine, or me or whoever, but don't just throw stuff out there that's I don't know. And yeah, right. Chris, the other Chris says, yeah, no one is a Walker. I mean, that's it. No one is a Walker supporter. It's crazy.
The sad thing about Walker, just as an aside, the sad thing about Walker is he's actually trying to talk about a fiscal plan. It's the wrong one, but he's actually trying to talk about a fiscal plan. And I wrote a column this past week that said, nobody's talking about a fiscal plan. None of the candidates are talking about a fiscal plan. And somebody sent me a note saying, well, Walker is. And my response to that is, yeah, but I don't trust him. I mean, I've been down this road. And I don't trust, the guy at all after what he did in 2016. Or 2017 or whatever year that was, 2016, fiscal year 2017. There we go.
Right.
I don't trust the guy at all. So I guess he's got a fiscal plan, but I actually haven't read that much of it because I just don't trust him personally with respect to.
No, he's not trustworthy. I was a supporter of his in his first run and in his second.
Oh, watch out. Craig will be on you now.
Up until the time that he took on Byron Malott, and then I was like, "You've lost your mind." And so, it's I don't know anybody who's a Walker, Bill Walker supporter around here. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. His fiscal plan is to eliminate the PFD. That's his fiscal plan. Let's just
he says not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But he wants to cash it all out and then take what's left. And we hope you like your $10,000 or whatever. And the rest of us could just, whatever.
Oh no, he's evolved beyond that. Now he's essentially adopted Liesel's 2015 or 2016 position that now that the permanent fund is of a certain size and now the dividends would be of X size, let's change that. Let's change how we do things, and let's move the permanent fund earnings over to state government, and let's let the PFD be determined by the declining production tax revenues. So yeah, he's not any longer cashing it out. He's now got a new plan that's basically let's go back to where Liesel was.
Yeah, which again, where Liesel? Wait, I'm looking for where's my crickets? Because I mean, it's Liesel McGuire. Who's that again? I mean, she threw her name in the hat, then changed lieutenant governor candidates, and is it Sarah Rasmussen now or somebody? Anyway, it's a I don't know, man. This may you live in interesting times is definitely a curse right now. That's the whole thing right now. Eliminating the PFD, I think most of the legislature would be okay with that at this point. It would take it off their hands, get it out of the room. They'd quit fighting over it, and government could have all that money, and they wouldn't have to be shamefaced every time somebody screamed about permanent fund dividends, Brad.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they could blame it on Walker again. I mean, I have not found a candidate I can support, a statewide candidate, and frankly, I'm having a lot of difficulty finding any legislative candidates I can support because they just aren't being realistic about the fiscal situation that we're facing. But no. Walker says he has a plan, but you can't trust what that guy says.
We had Matt Halala on yesterday, and his answer was unbridled optimism. That was his answer when it came to it. I'm going to lead from the front, unbridled because I was very specific. How do we survive the next 10 years? Going through this and that and the other thing. Unbridled optimism is what he started out with, and there you go.
Is he one of those we're going to have production increases and that's going to solve everything?
He did allude to that at one point. So,
here we go. Another guy who doesn't understand how the production tax system works.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3. We are on to number 3. And so the big answer is, of course, everybody showed up. The 4 legislators showed up in Juneau, right? And they got this snapshot of the chamber, and there's one guy out in the thing, and the speaker, and they gavelled in, they gavelled out, and they're like, "Yep, no, it's there you go, we're done." And they're not even coming back until the 10th of August. Everybody's trying to get reelected, and it looks like that the Glenfarne, AKLNG project is potentially dead, and maybe somebody will revisit it in the future, but I mean, and of course we're running out of gas. So Brad, where do we go with AKLNG from here? What happens next?
The problem, Michael, I'm going to start with the problem, then I'm going to talk about maybe solutions. But the problem is in this past special session, in these past 2 special sessions, is that what we've been through now? The problem, the issue has become more complex. The issue started out that Glenfarne needed certainty with respect to property taxes. Okay. And, and we'll sort of deal with that. And everybody, we had 30 days of hearings or whatever. Giesel called in and all that sort of stuff. And so we the legislature sort of struggled and came around to an answer on that. But what the whole S-corp issue has surfaced is there's a second tax certainty that when you think about it now, given what happened at the end of this last special session, there's a second tax certainty that Glenfarne is now saying the legislature has to buy off on, and that is upstream tax certainty. What Glenfarne's saying is if you start messing around with upstream taxes like the S-corp tax or unmentioned, but certainly I can see it sitting there, SB 21. If you start messing around with upstream taxes, with producer taxes, such that the producers will come and say, "Oh, well, I don't know if I can give you gas or I can sell you gas under these terms because the legislature is messing around with me." That now Glenfarne is also asking for, this project is also asking for upstream tax certainty. before the project can go. Because Glenfarne said, we can't go without, we don't have a project if you can't resolve the Hilcorp issue. And it's more than the S-corp issue. I mean, when you think about it, when you think about somebody saying, I need to be certain, a producer gets away with saying, I need to be certain about what my tax situation is before I'm going to enter into this contract with Glenfarne to supply them with the gas they need to be able to do this project. If you have producers saying that and Glenfarne echoing that, parroting that, then now we got to talk about, good God, we got to talk about the SB 21 issues that we've got with the upstream taxes to get those resolved. Because perish the thought we get in the middle, we do this and we get in the middle of a session where we're talking about SB 21 and Glenfarne says, oh wait, you can't do that because you're going to mess with our upstream contracts and that'll undermine the project and we don't know what we're going to do. So this has become, this issue around this tax certainty that Glenfarne's asking for has become much more complex as a result of the position that Glenfarne took at the end of the legislative session, and it's going to take a while to resolve that. I think what would bring clarity, and if I were Glenfarne, which I'm not, but if I were Glenfarne, what I would be focused on is getting customer contracts, the export customer contracts, the thing that truly would make this project deliver much lower cost gas to South Central and to Alaskans and to data centers and whatever the heck we're going to do with all this stuff. The thing that would truly make this project a big deal for Alaskans. If I were Glenfarne, I would be focusing on getting those customer contracts in some sort of shape where I could come to the legislature and say, look, I've got a customer contract. It's conditioned on XYZ from the legislature or XYZ from Alaska. So if you do X, Y, and Z, I will have customer contracts. And if I have customer contracts, I am absolutely convinced I can deliver you $5, $6, whatever the in-state price from phase 2 is. I can deliver you this price gas. And the legislature would stampede, frankly, they'd run over anybody standing in the way. They would stampede toward approving that because A, it would solidify the project. B, it would result in lower price gas to rail belt consumers. They haven't done that though. Glenfarne hasn't done that. I mean, Glenfarne hasn't come and said, you do XYZ and we've got contracts. They've said, I mean, on the whole property tax thing, they said, you need to do that so we can get financing, so we can go back and talk to customers and maybe get customers tied down to this, but we're not sure we're going to get customers tied down to this. And we may be back with other things. And oh yeah, there's this whole upstream issue now that has to be resolved. And it's just gone in a circle. If they looked at it, to me, if they looked at it from the end point and said, all right, the objective here is to get customers, export customers, right? Tie them down and be able to go back to Alaska and say, look, we got them, right? We got these customers. All we have to do is build it and they will come. And the contracts are all set up to do that. But short of that sort of, you need to do X, Y, Z. And if you do X, Y, Z, we will have a project. Short of that, I think we just keep spinning for, however long the earth continues to rotate on its axis.
Which will be a while, hopefully. So no, I mean, and that's it. So you don't think that, at this point, what's the over and under, Brad, on what's the over and under on some kind of gas line coming out less the tax certainty this session, or is this a next session? Does Glenfarne hang out? Do they wash their hands and walk away? I mean, they get a payback. I know that there's a guaranteed 20 million or something from the state, so they're going to get some money back. But I mean, where do we go from here?
I think Glenfarne, I think this exploded into a much bigger issue. I think this whole thing around the S-corp and the upstream tax certainty exploded this into a much bigger issue at the end of the session. And I don't know how you got Humpty Dumpty put back together again. I mean, it's Glenfarn, in my opinion, Glenfarn shouldn't have said that. Glenfarn should have said, we need property tax. And oh yeah, by the way, you need to exempt us from this S-corp issue because that would affect our economics. But what you do upstream is your business. We're not going to get into it, and we're not going to say the project's dependent on it. But they stepped off that ledge, right? And said, oh, yep, you got to resolve upstream too. And that's just a huge issue. So I can't see this getting resolved. I mean, the governor hasn't even proposed a bill, right?
Well, that was what surprised me, is the governor was supposedly going to come in with a clean bill at the beginning of session, and there's 4 legislators there and no bill from the governor. He could have still done his part, even if only 4 people showed up. At least he would have had a clean bill there to lay out in front of them, which I thought was a little weird that he had to. Maybe he just thinks it's just not going to, I don't know, but I would have at least gone through the motions.
Yeah, his argument is that, well, I still want to I want to have all these discussions and we'll come to a consensus and then we'll introduce a consensus and everybody will come in and vote on it. It's not going to work that way. And the governor needs to stake out a position and needs to back it up and needs to be there personally to explain it and negotiate around it. And so I just think he won't think he's given up, but in the way these things work, I think he has given up. And I just don't think. I think he's going to end his term without having delivered on the project. It's going to be up to the next governor. And as I say, the one thing that this last session did do is interject yet another huge issue into the middle of it, the upstream certainty issue. So it's I don't know about overs and unders, but I don't have a really good feeling that this is trending toward success, unless Glenfarn can come in and say, you need to do X, Y, Z. And if Glenfarn said, we have a customer, we have Japanese and Korean customers that are ready to sign on the dotted line, you have to do X, Y, Z. And one of those X, Y, Z's is upstream certainty. If they said that, I don't know that upstream certainty they might run over anybody the legislature might run over anybody who argued about upstream issues in that context. But they have to be able to say that we have real customers ready to go with X, Y, Z.
I don't know, Brad. I think you might be being overly optimistic, something I never thought that I would accuse you of. That if they walked in hat in hand with the signed agreements, that the legislature would fall over themselves to get it passed. I mean, I think that is because there are just people in the legislature that just don't want it to happen, right? Yeah. For a variety of reasons. I mean, whether it's Wilikowski and company because they hate the oil companies and gas companies so much, or if it's other Democrats who don't want to, they don't want to further, petroleum or any kind of oil or gas production, or whether it's just people who know that Dunleavy is eyeing the future and the Murkowski run, and they don't want to give him some kind of legacy or something. I mean, I think it's awful. I think that's awful optimistic of you to say if they came back with a thing. I mean, I just don't know if there's enough wherewithal to pull that through.
Oh, well, maybe in this legislature, you're right. Maybe I was more focused on how could they get it in the next legislature.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. And maybe you're right. Although a lot of those players are running unopposed, so they're going to some of the same players are going to be back anyway.
I will say this. I mean, we would eat up whatever if they came in tomorrow and said, all right, here's the contract subject to XYZ. You got to do XYZ. I would say that there would be due diligence to be done on whether that's exactly what the contracts say and exactly what the XYZ conditions are. And that would chew up a lot of time trying to work through that. So it is unlikely. It's a fair criticism of me to say it's unlikely that would happen. That would happen this session. But to get it to happen, maybe I ought to say it this way: to get it to happen in any session.
Yeah.
While the Earth's still spinning on its axis, to get it happen in any session, I think that's the thing it's going to take, because this sort of, well, we may do it if you do this. It's just, especially when you sort of dig into it, especially the way the S-corp issue came up and now surfaced upstream certainty. The way we're doing it now, I just don't think it ever gets resolved, because you keep discovering new things that it's sort of subject to if as it goes along.
Joshua made a valid point. Just to backtrack a little bit here, he says SB 21 is next. It's the one thing that we should actually be talked about. The per barrel credits is actually subsidizing non-producers. He's that and the GVR and all the other things that are in SB 21. I think it should be something that should be looked at. I would agree with that. And maybe we need to have a whole massive discussion. Maybe if we're going to talk about upstream or we're going to talk about the S-corp and everything else, maybe that should be part of the discussion.
Well, if Glenfarne's going to say that this whole thing is dependent on the upstream producers, particularly Hilcorp, being happy and being satisfied and selling to us under terms that are acceptable to us. If Glenfarne's going to say that, then yeah, we're going to have to go into all that, because I can easily. I mean, Hilcorp's kicking and screaming over the S-corp provision, right? I mean, that should be a no-brainer. We should have done that a long time ago, but they're kicking and screaming over that. I mean, and so imagine how much the kicking and screaming is going to go on over the necessary oil tax revisions. And if Hilcorp's going to say, well, we don't know if we're going to sell gas to Glenfarne under these terms and conditions until we resolve this issue, then yeah, we're going to have to go through it as part of this process. That Pandora's box got opened at the end of the session by Glenfarne conditioning its approval on Hilcorp being happy. And that Pandora's box has a lot of parts in it. So
yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And as Brian makes the point, the issue is never the issue. The issue is power. And that's what we saw in this last legislative session, right? That's what we saw in this last special session. The issue is what we saw in the regular session. All the power. They wanted to control everything. They wanted to run it. Wilikowski, what he really wants is he doesn't want any private. He wants a state-run gas corporation. That's what he wants, that the legislature's in charge of. The power is the issue. That's the long and the short of it here.
Yeah.
Brett, what are you going to be watching out here for over the next 15 days or whatever, as they wait around sitting on their thumbs and rotating? What are you going to be watching for?
Well, I'll see if the governor comes out with any proposal. I'll watch what Glenfarne and Hilcorp say. I'll watch how the S-corp keeps playing out in the press. I'll watch the campaigns. I mean, we got an election cycle going on now, and we're gonna get down to 4 in the governor's race. I'm not sure how the heck we're going to do that, and what percentage it's going to take to get in the 4. Maybe 6 will get you in the 4. But I'm going to be watching that and what people say about that, and how candidates struggle to describe their fiscal plans in a way that actually worries about middle income Alaska families, the ones that are leaving, the ones that are leaving the state and telling us goodbye.
Quickly, can you rate the candidates that you see? I know you're not any candidate, but I mean, we keep hearing how Tom Begich is ahead, but then we see Bernadette is ahead, but Bronson is there. And any ideas to who's going to come out? Any predictions on maybe the top 5 or 6 in your mind, or are you just kind of watching?
Michael, I really don't. I sometimes wonder why candidates like Shelley Hughes, who I said at the beginning, I really wanted to support if she would have backed up the position she took in the legislative fiscal policy working group. I really wanted to support. I keep wondering why candidates like Shelley or like Matt or others who aren't being mentioned as falling into the top 4 in any of these polls. I keep wondering what their strategy is, why they think they're going to get across the line.
Where's their path to victory? That's the question. All right, Brad, thank you so much, my friend. It's good to talk with you. We will see you next week. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Thank you, Michael. Look forward to seeing you again. Well, that's a wrap for another week's edition of the weekly top 3 from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you again for joining us. Remember that you can find past episodes on our YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, and keep track of us during the week on Facebook and Twitter. This has been Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We look forward to you joining us again next week for the next edition of the Weekly Top 3.